Some of the best sci-fi films of the 2000s did not fail because they were bad. They vanished because audiences were not ready. What if the most mind-bending, haunting, and unforgettable science fiction of that decade was buried in plain sight while louder films took all the attention? In this countdown, you are about to uncover 12 forgotten worlds that still feel dangerous, intelligent, and strangely ahead of their time, and one of them may leave you questioning reality itself. Number 12. The Cell, 2000. Beauty can be more disturbing than blood. That is what makes The Cell so hard to shake. On the surface, it looks like a serial killer thriller with a sci-fi gimmick. But once it begins, the film drops you into something far stranger. A nightmarish world where psychology, technology, and visual art collide in ways Hollywood still rarely attempts. The premise alone is instantly gripping. An experimental therapist, played by Jennifer Lopez, uses advanced technology to enter the mind of a comatose killer before his latest victim dies. But the real power of The Cell is not the plot, it is the experience. Directed by Tarsem Singh, this film does not merely show a damaged mind. It turns that mind into a vast, surreal kingdom of trauma, ego, terror, and ritualized beauty. Every sequence inside the killer's subconscious feels like a moving painting, ornate, grotesque, hypnotic. Long before elevated horror became a label people threw around casually, The Cell was already blending genre storytelling with art house ambition. That is a big reason it remains such a fascinating watch. It is not content to entertain you in a familiar way. It wants to trap you in an emotional and visual fever dream. What makes the film linger is its ambition. Yes, it is unsettling. Yes, it is deliberately strange. But that is exactly why it deserves rediscovery. This is not safe, disposable studio sci-fi. It is bold, excessive, and unforgettable. Even when it divides audiences, it does something far more valuable than being merely likable. It burns itself into your memory. Number 11. Titan A. E. 2000. Here is the cruel irony. One of the most energetic sci-fi adventures of the 2000s became famous not for its imagination, but for being overlooked. Titan A.E. arrived with speed, attitude, and a genuinely big-hearted mission, yet it never got the respect it deserved. And that is a shame, because underneath its cool surface is a surprisingly emotional story about extinction, survival, and the desperate human need to start again when everything familiar has been erased. The film throws you into catastrophe almost immediately. Earth is destroyed by a powerful alien race called the Drage, and humanity is scattered across the galaxy like refugees with no real home. That setup alone gives Titan A.E. more emotional weight than many animated sci-fi films ever reach. At the center is Kale, a young man who seems ordinary until he learns he may hold the key to a lost ship called the Titan, a vessel carrying humanity's last real hope. From there, the movie becomes a fast-moving chase through hostile worlds, pirate zones, strange species, and collapsing chances. What makes the film stand out is its tone. It has the energy of a rebellious space opera, but it never loses sight of what is at stake. There is loss here. There is loneliness here. There is also hope, and that combination gives the film real momentum. Visually, it mixes hand-drawn animation with early digital work in a way that now feels like a fascinating time capsule from a transitional era in animation. Titan A.E. may have been buried by circumstance, but it remains a gutsy, sincere, and deeply watchable blast of sci-fi adventure. It deserved a bigger legacy than it got. Number 10. Code 46, 2003. What if the future did not arrive with explosions, robots, and chaos, but with quiet rules that slowly made love itself illegal? That is the chilling idea at the center of Code 46, one of the most understated and haunting sci-fi films of the decade. It does not scream for your attention. It pulls you in softly, almost gently, and then leaves you with a kind of sadness that feels far more personal than most dystopian cinema ever manages. Set in a near future shaped by corporate control, surveillance, restricted movement, and genetic regulation. The film follows an investigator played by Tim Robbins, who travels to Shanghai to look into a case of document fraud. There he meets a woman played by Samantha Morton, and what begins as an inquiry slowly turns into something more intimate and dangerous. The title refers to a law connected to genetic compatibility, and that idea becomes the emotional trap at the heart of the story. In this world, science has not just reshaped society, it has invaded the most private corners of human connection. What makes Code 46 special is its restraint. It does not rely on spectacle. It builds mood through loneliness, quiet conversations, urban alienation, and the feeling that people are being watched even when nothing dramatic is happening. That gives the film a strangely believable texture. It feels less like fantasy and more like a future that arrived by small compromises. That is what makes it so effective. This is not the kind of sci-fi that overwhelms you with noise. It unsettles you with intimacy. And in my opinion, that makes it one of the most quietly devastating forgotten sci-fi films of the 2000s. Number 9. Dark City, 1998. What if the world you've always known was a lie, constructed to keep you in the dark? Dark City is the haunting, mind-bending film that asks that very question, and then plunges you into an urban nightmare of shifting realities and twisted memories. Originally overlooked and often lost among other sci-fi thrillers of its time, Dark City now stands as one of the most intriguing cult classics of the late 90s, forgotten by many but unforgettable for those who dared to venture into its dark depths. The film follows John Murdoch, played by Rufus Sewell, who wakes up with no memory in a city where day and night seem to be constantly changing. People around him are either strangers or enemies, and strange men, called the Strangers, seem to have the power to alter the very fabric of the world itself. As Murdoch uncovers the truth about his past, he also learns about the horrifying nature of the city, where memories are manipulated, identities are stolen, and nothing is what it seems. Directed by Alex Proyas, Dark City is a film that mixes film noir with high-concept sci-fi and existential horror. It plays with the idea of reality and identity in ways that The Matrix did, but with a far darker and more oppressive tone. Visually stunning, with a striking claustrophobic cityscape, Dark City is as much about atmosphere as it is about plot. Its shadows stretch far beyond its city walls, and its themes of control and self-discovery resonate deeply with anyone who has ever questioned the world around them. Its originality and its chilling, dreamlike atmosphere make Dark City an absolute must-see, especially for anyone interested in forgotten, mind-bending sci-fi. It may not have had the commercial success it deserved, but over time, it has quietly built a strong legacy, one that makes it deserving of a spot in the pantheon of underrated films. Number 8. Impostor, 2001. A man wakes up as himself, goes to work as himself, speaks like himself, and is suddenly told he may not be human at all. That is the brutal paranoid engine behind Impostor, a forgotten American sci-fi thriller that grabs you with one terrifying idea. What if your entire identity could be turned against you in an instant? Based on a story by Philip K. Dick, the film drops you into a war-torn future where suspicion is everything, and one accusation can erase your life before you even understand what is happening. The story follows weapons designer Spencer Olham, played by Gary Sinise, who is abruptly accused of being an alien replicant carrying a hidden device meant to assassinate Earth's leadership. From that moment, the film turns into a desperate chase through a grim future landscape of checkpoints, surveillance, and fear. What makes Impostor work is not just the action, it is the psychological panic. Spencer is not simply running from arrest. He is running from the possibility that the people hunting him may know something about him that he does not know himself. Directed by Gary Flatter, the film has the nervous tension of a fugitive thriller mixed with the identity collapse that defines the best Philip K. Dick stories. It is lean, dark, and packed with existential unease. Impostor may not be the most famous sci-fi film of the decade, but it absolutely earns its place as a forgotten gem. It turns paranoia into propulsion, and that makes it a strong American substitute. Number 7, Moon, 2009. Imagine giving 3 years of your life to a lonely job at the edge of space, only to realize the worst thing waiting for you is not outside the station. It is inside. That slow-burning dread is what makes Moon so powerful. This is not a film that explodes onto the screen, demanding attention. It creeps in quietly, with isolation, silence, routine, and the kind of emotional unease that grows heavier the longer you sit with it. By the time it reveals what it is really doing, it has already pulled you into one of the most humane sci-fi stories of the decade. Directed by Duncan Jones in his debut feature, Moon centers on Sam Bell, a solitary lunar worker nearing the end of his contract. Sam Rockwell carries the film with an extraordinary performance that feels intimate, fragile, funny, and heartbreaking all at once. His only real companion is the base computer, Gertie, voiced with calm precision by Kevin Spacey. At first, everything seems like a meditation on loneliness and mental strain. But when a shocking discovery fractures Sam's understanding of his own situation, the film transforms into something much bigger, a haunting meditation on identity, exploitation, memory, and what it means to be human when even your own life may not belong to you. What makes Moon endure is its restraint. It does not hide behind endless action or visual overload. It builds its emotional force through performance, design, and the aching silence of being forgotten by the world you serve. It feels like a direct spiritual descendant of quieter, more thoughtful science fiction from the 1970s, yet its themes feel disturbingly modern. Moon is not just underrated, it is one of the clearest examples of how science fiction can be intimate, devastating, and unforgettable without ever raising its voice. Number 6, Cypher, 2002. What if the most dangerous conspiracy was not happening around you, but inside you? Cypher begins with that kind of paranoia and never really lets go. It is one of those forgotten sci-fi thrillers that feels cool, controlled, and deceptively simple at first, only to reveal something much stranger underneath. The film drops you into a world of corporate espionage, false identities, coded messages, and memory manipulation, and it does so with a level of style that makes even its quietest scenes feel loaded with tension. You are never fully sure who is lying, who is watching, or whether the man at the center of it all even understands himself. The story follows Morgan Sullivan, played by Jeremy Northam, an ordinary man who is recruited into what appears to be a routine espionage job between competing corporations. He is told to attend conferences, record speeches, and pass along information. It sounds dull, almost absurdly dull, and that is exactly the point. Director Vincenzo Natali, who had already shown his talent for psychological unease with Cube, uses that bland surface to hide a steadily deepening nightmare. As Morgan falls under the influence of a mysterious woman played by Lucy Liu, the film opens into a maze of brainwashing, manufactured identity, and corporate power so invasive it begins to feel almost intimate. What makes Cypher so effective is its icy precision. It does not rely on noise. It relies on atmosphere, suspicion, and the slow collapse of certainty. That gives the film a sleek, unnerving power that has only grown stronger with time. In an age obsessed with data, manipulation, and control, Cypher now feels less like forgotten sci-fi and more like a warning that arrived too early. Number 5. Equilibrium, 2002. In this future, feeling is treated like a disease. That is the brutal hook of Equilibrium, a film that was dismissed too quickly, too lazily, and far too often as just another attempt to ride the wave of the Matrix. But that label never really did it justice. Yes, it has stylized action. Yes, it has black coats, rigid systems, and a hero waking up to the truth. But underneath the surface, Equilibrium has its own identity. A fierce dystopian story about what happens when a society becomes so terrified of pain that it chooses to murder emotion itself. Set in the totalitarian state of Libya, the film stars Christian Bale as John Preston, an elite enforcer known as a cleric, trained to hunt down anyone guilty of feeling, reading forbidden art, or resisting the regime's emotional suppression drug, prosium. That setup alone gives the film a sharp psychological edge. It is not just about rebellion. It is about the terrifying idea that beauty, grief, love, music, and memory have all become criminal acts. The more Preston begins to miss his doses, the more the world changes around him. Suddenly, a room, a face, or a piece of music carries dangerous meaning. Directed by Kurt Wimmer, the film combines philosophical dystopia with the now famous gun-kata combat style, giving it a visual identity that still stands out. But the action is not the reason it lingers. What lingers is the sadness at its core. Equilibrium understands that a world without emotion is not peaceful. It is spiritually dead. That is why the film still hits. Beneath its stylish violence is a surprisingly sincere defense of human feeling, and that gives it far more soul than many of its louder, more celebrated imitators. Number 4 Primer, 2004. Some sci-fi films hold your hand. Primer quietly locks the door and leaves you alone with the consequences. This is not the kind of movie that explains itself in big dramatic speeches or convenient emotional cues. It expects you to keep up, to listen carefully, and to feel the growing dread as two ordinary engineers stumble into something far bigger and darker than they ever meant to create. That challenge is exactly what makes it so unforgettable. Primer does not just show time travel as a clever concept. It turns it into a cold, technical, deeply unsettling breakdown of trust, ambition, and control. Written, directed, produced by, and starring Shane Carruth. The film was made for roughly $7,000, and that fact alone has become part of its legend. But the budget is not why it matters. What matters is how fiercely intelligent it is. The story follows two engineers who accidentally discover a way to manipulate time through a garage-built device that initially seems like a breakthrough opportunity. Yet the more they test it, hide it, and exploit it, the more the situation mutates into paranoia and moral decay. Their friendship begins to splinter under the weight of secrecy, duplication, and the impossible need to stay ahead of consequences that are multiplying faster than they can understand them. What makes Primer extraordinary is its realism. This does not feel like movie science designed for easy thrills. It feels like obsessive people pushing past an ethical line because they can. The language is dense, the structure is famously demanding, and the atmosphere becomes darker with every scene. That is why Primer endures. It is not just a puzzle. It is a warning about intelligence without wisdom. Few forgotten sci-fi films trust their audience this much, and even fewer reward that trust so completely. Number 3. Sunshine, 2007. The sun is dying, and with it, every argument, every memory, every promise humanity ever made to itself. That is the chilling scale of Sunshine, a film that begins like a mission and slowly turns into something closer to a spiritual crisis. On paper, the premise sounds almost impossibly large. A team of astronauts is sent on a last, desperate voyage to reignite the fading sun with a massive stellar bomb. But what makes Sunshine unforgettable is not just the scale of that idea. It is the way the film takes a cosmic problem and traps it inside the fragile minds of the people trying to solve it. Directed by Danny Boyle and written by Alex Garland, the film follows the crew of the Icarus II as they move toward near-certain death in the hope of saving Earth. The cast is packed with talent, including Cillian Murphy, Rose Byrne, Chris Evans, Michelle Yeoh, and Cliff Curtis. Yet no one feels larger than the mission itself. That is part of the film's power. Every character is forced into the shadow of something vast, beautiful, and merciless. As technical failures pile up and psychological strain begins to crack the crew's sense of unity, the film tightens from majestic science fiction into nerve-shredding survival tension. Visually, Sunshine is breathtaking. The light of the sun is not treated as scenery. It is treated like a force beyond human scale, something holy, terrifying, and seductive all at once. Yes, its third act remains divisive, and that debate has followed the film for years. But even that controversy has helped preserve its mystique. Sunshine takes risks that safer studio sci-fi would never dare. It is intense, melancholy, and strangely transcendent. Even when it stumbles, it does so while reaching for something enormous. And that ambition is exactly why it deserves to be remembered. Number 2. The Man from Earth, 2007. No spaceships, no laser battles, no collapsing cities. Just one room, one conversation, and a single impossible claim that changes everything. That is the astonishing gamble of The Man from Earth, a film so stripped down it almost dares you to underestimate it. And then, scene by scene, question by question, it quietly becomes one of the most absorbing science fiction experiences of its era. Few forgotten films prove more clearly that a great idea, handled with confidence, can be more gripping than any spectacle money can buy. Written by legendary screenwriter Jerome Bixby, who conceived the story decades earlier, the film centers on John Oldman, a departing university professor, who casually tells a group of colleagues that he is actually 14,000 years old. That premise could have turned silly in weaker hands. Instead, the film plays it with remarkable seriousness. His friends, experts in fields like biology, history, anthropology, and religion, begin testing his story from every angle. What follows is not action, but intellectual pressure. The tension comes from thought itself. Every answer raises a larger question. Every skeptical challenge deepens the mystery. And because the film never rushes to reassure the audience, it becomes more gripping the longer it goes. What makes The Man from Earth so memorable is its confidence in language, performance, and implication. It trusts the viewer to sit with big ideas: mortality, belief, memory, civilization, and the unbearable weight of endless time. The film feels like science fiction boiled down to its purest essence, not machinery, but possibility. It turns conversation into suspense, and philosophy into drama. That is a rare achievement. This is not flashy sci-fi. It is intelligent, intimate, and quietly mesmerizing. In a genre often obsessed with scale, The Man from Earth proves that one of the biggest journeys imaginable can happen without anyone leaving the room. Number 1. Pandorum, 2009. The ship should be empty. That is the first terrifying lie Pandorum tells you. The second is even worse. Whatever is wrong here did not begin with the creatures in the dark. It began with the human mind itself. Marketed by many as just another monster movie in space, Pandorum was easy for audiences to misread on first release. But revisit it now, and what emerges is something far more vicious and interesting. A brutal fusion of claustrophobic horror, psychological breakdown, survival action, and existential dread. This is not just a film about being trapped on a starship. It is a film about being trapped inside fear, memory, and a collapsing sense of reality. Directed by Christian Alvart and produced by Paul W.S. Anderson, the film opens with Corporal Bauer, played by Ben Foster, waking from hypersleep aboard the Elysium, a massive vessel carrying humanity's future to a distant world. Systems are failing. Communication is broken, and huge sections of the ship have fallen into darkness. Joined by Lieutenant Peyton, played by Dennis Quaid, Bauer begins pushing deeper into the vessel, only to find signs of violence, degeneration, and something living in the shadows. The setup is effective on its own, but Pandorum becomes truly compelling because it keeps turning inward. The title refers to a condition caused by deep space travel, a kind of psychosis that distorts memory and perception. And that idea poisons every scene with uncertainty. What makes Pandorum worthy of the top spot is how aggressively it commits. The action is savage, the atmosphere oppressive, and the reveals hit with genuine force. But beneath all that, the film is asking something darker. What happens when human beings are cut off long enough for civilization itself to rot from the inside? That question gives Pandorum its bite. This is not forgotten because it lacked power. It is forgotten because it was harsher, smarter, and more disturbing than audiences expected. And that is exactly why everyone needs to watch it. Some sci-fi films do not vanish because they fail. They vanish because they arrive too early, think too deeply, or refuse to play safe. These 12 films prove the 2000s were full of daring ideas, hiding just outside the mainstream. So which one shocked you most? And which forgotten sci-fi gem did we miss? Drop it in the comments, and keep searching the stars.